I'm going to ask you to please indulge me for a few minutes because, there's some times when I repeat stories that I've told before, and maybe you've heard it, maybe you haven't, but like I said, just indulge me for a moment here. At a former parish that I was at, they every year had a very big festival. It was a large festival all weekend long, and of course, lots and lots of things going on. And I enjoyed being a part of just about every aspect of that particular festival in some way. But all throughout the parking lot, it was filled with tents and rides and what have you. I mean, there was really not a lot of parking space right there at the church. But we still had Mass, all right? We just had to strategically, park the people and then strategically have them depart the parking lot. Well, one year I was working in the parking situation during the Masses. And basically, when Mass was ended, we said you have to vacate so the next, we can get ready for the parking for the next one. And I was in the road, and I was with a buddy of mine, and Jim was on one side of me, I was on the other, and we were directing traffic, and they were coming out in two lines. And of course, the right way had to go right. The left side had to go left. There was the only way to do it so we could move these cars out as quick as possible. And of course, get the next, round of cars in so we could celebrate Mass. And these cars were coming out, and this gentleman comes up in the right side and says, honks and looks at us and said, "I'm going left," And Jim says, "No, sir, I'm sorry, but you have to go right." And, he says, "No, I'm going that way." And really didn't say too much, and all of a sudden he hit that accelerator, he sped out, cut off the car in front of him or just to the side of him, hit Jim, okay? Now, Jim is big and muscular like me, so it didn't hurt him too bad, all right? He's in great shape like I am. But, he sped off down the road, after cutting off this car, and, I thought to myself, he just left church. He just left church. Sort of that person that comes to church, and of course there's hats at the door, and he takes the hat off the rack, he puts it on, and he comes and sits down in here, and it says, "I'm a good Christian." But for some reason he goes to the door, and he takes it, and he leaves it at the door. And he forgets, basically, what the rest of living is supposed to be about when we follow Jesus. I started thinking about that story again when I was reflecting this week on this particular message in the gospel. There's two people that come to pray. And of course, it's pretty obvious. One is bragging about all that they do. And one, of course, can't even look up to God because he's seeking mercy. And what does Jesus say? You know which one God listened to. I think that's a challenge for us. It's a challenge for us to say, what person do we want to be, or who are we? I've done these kind of messages before where, I challenge each and every one of us, don't just be the person that checks the box, but take it out there. It's very easy for us as Christians, as Catholics even, to just kind of come here and say, I did my duty because I'm here. Because isn't that one of the precepts of the church, to attend, Mass? We're kind of checking the box. But if you really listen to this message today, it's not about checking the box. It's not about just showing up. It's about showing up and then standing up and then walking out and then taking it with you. The challenge is, what hat do we want to wear when we leave the doors of this church? I'm sorry, but I look at you right now, and there's a lot of good Christians in here right now. You are good Christians because you're here going to Mass, worshiping God, praying and singing, receiving Him in the Eucharist. You're good Christians, aren't you? We all are. But then again, it's what we're faced with when we leave the doors. And I guess the challenge is this, is that, what Jesus is really trying to say, I think, about living the right way is to say, does your life, does what you say and what you do, and whether you're at work or with your family, Does it reflect God? Does it reflect the gospel? Does it reflect the good news and the choices that you make, the decisions that you make? I mean, it's easy, again, just to be that good Christian right here. But do our lives reflect God? There's an Episcopal minister, his name is Adam Bucko, and he talks about it and says, this is about striving for holiness. And we've heard that term before, is that we should seek to be holy people. And I think that's good, we should, but a lot of people will step back and say, well, no, let the church people be the holy people. I just want to go and do my duty. All right? But the Minister Bucko, or Reverend Bucko, basically says, look, it's our birthright to be holy. And he says it's not left to the professional ministers. It's not left, to the professional people that spend their life, in ministry. It's our birthright that we're all called to be holy. I love what he says. He says, intimacy with God does not belong to a special group of religious people. It should be for all of us. It's our birthright. It's why we're here, to open ourselves to the inner mystery of God. When you think about those two people that came to the temple to pray that Jesus is talking about in that parable, you'd think, well, one of them, is trying to do the religious thing, and the other really isn't. But yet, we can do the religious thing on the outside, God really wants to know the inside. At the heart of it, are we giving ourselves over to Him? Are we humbling ourselves before our God? This, Pharisee, he came up and told you the list, I pray, I tithe, I attend, I'm there. On the outside, it looks good, but then all of a sudden he turns and he says, I'm glad I'm not like you. I'm glad I'm not like them. I'm better than them. He exalted himself. That isn't what God asks of us. He wants us to have that relationship. He wants us to get deeper. He wants us to take the deep dive into our journey with Him. Reverend Bucko says there's a few things I think that you can do. And I love how he says, first, you connect with the world from a place of prayer. From a place of prayer, not ideologies, but a place of prayer. That we draw ourselves into a relationship with God by not just memorizing the prayers, but really talking and listening with our God. Taking that step that takes us deeper into relationship. I had the second graders last week, and as we're preparing them, they had their first mini session with First Eucharist and reconciliation, and that was kind of what we were focusing on, is just getting to know each other. And I says, just as you're getting to know each other and learning a little bit about each other, that's exactly what God wants of us. That's exactly what prayer is. As we get to know Him, He already knows us. But we get to know Him, and we get to know exactly what He asks of us. And I think the more that we dive into a deeper prayer, not just memorizing the prayers, just not reciting them, but letting prayer become a part of our life, it really begins to give us a sense that, all life is from God, and that no life is better than the other. And that we all stand on the same page. We can try to look at others and say, well, you know what? They're not as good as me. Well, yes, they are. I know it's a hard place to be sometimes when we look at some people's lives. But they're no different. Created in the same image of the same God. The second thing that Bucko says, he says, come to terms with your social position and how it relates to other people's place in the world. I think this is always a tough one, because I think for most of us, it's very human nature to say, well, I worked hard for where I'm at in my life. They didn't. I worked hard for, where I'm at and what I've got and all the things that I have. They didn't. I get that. I get that. But I think sometimes when we do that, what do? We exalt ourselves. We place ourselves above others. And when we do that, we begin to judge. And we begin to create a world that is divided of it's us and them. Again, he's saying come to terms with your social position. And maybe at some point we need to release or let go of our privileges. That will bring us closer to God. The third thing, remember that talking about fairness is not the same thing as being fair. I think it's important that, it's very easy to say, you know what? We need to be fair. We need to do it this way. But there is a point in time where we have to say to ourselves, this is how I have to live my life. I have to do it right. I have to be fair. I have to be fair to others. In the way I talk, in the way I act, especially with my family, my friends, or my coworkers. Is the fairness there? That's a challenge. The last thing that he says, and this is a big one, and it actually comes from Mother Teresa. Saint Teresa of Calcutta. She said, practice works of mercy. And I love this line. Make sure our hands are touching the hands of those who are suffering and struggling. I think when we do that, we take ourselves and we put ourselves at a level where we see each other not as different, not above others, but the same. One and the same. Again, when we exalt ourselves, we push others down. And that isn't what he's saying. When he tells us, we need to think of the other, and especially the less fortunate. That's what it means to be holy. That's what it means to seek holiness in our lives. All the things that we do on the outside, we need that, yes. We need the prayers. We need the church attendance. We need the scripture reading. Because hopefully it draws us into a place where we take that journey, that deeper dive into the relationship with God. I once heard a story about a man that died and he went to heaven. And of course, when he got to the pearly gates, St. Peter was there. And he says, welcome. But he says, you can't cross over right now because we kind of work on a point system here. And you have to accumulate a certain amount of points before you can come in. And, it's based upon how you lived your life. And, of course, St. Peter said, well, go ahead. Tell me how you did. And maybe, we'll see what your points add up to. And the guy thought to himself, well, I'm going to go right for the religious stuff. Because I think if I hit that one, that's going to just boost me right up there. And of course, he says, I was a good Catholic. I went to church every Sunday. I didn't miss a Sunday. I didn't miss a holy day. I did everything, that it says to go to church every Sunday and holy days. I was there in God's house, worshiping every Sunday and on holy days. All right? Oh, by the way, I forgot to say this. You got to accumulate 1,000 points. All right? I missed that point. So 1,000 points. Okay? So St. Peter looks at him and says on that one, and this guy's thinking, he's got to get about 50 or 60 on, or 500 or 600 on just this one. And St. Peter looked at it and says, that's really good. He says, okay, that's worth 2 points. The guy's just a little bit nervous, He says, all right. He says, I'm going to throw this one at him. I read the Bible. I read the Bible every day. I didn't just let it become something on the coffee table. I read the Bible every day. And I did my best to follow the readings, prepare myself for church every day. And, St. Peter looked at him and said, you're doing good. That's 2 more points. This guy's getting nervous. What is he at right now? 900 and what? 900 and... Thank you, okay? I'm not so good at math, so help me, Michael. All right? So anyways, he says, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. He says, you know what? He says, I memorized my prayers. He says, I prayed the Lord's Prayer. I prayed the Hail Mary, I prayed the Rosary. I did that on a regular basis, He's just throwing all this out because he's thinking, this is what I've got to do. St. Peter says 2 more points. He's really struggling now. He's really nervous. He's at 996. That's tough. And so he just kind of threw himself at the mercy of St. Peter and said, I don't know what else to tell you except that, you know what? I loved God with all my heart, my mind, and my soul. And I just put everything always into his hands. And I loved my neighbor. And I sought out always just to kind of take care of the other. I don't know what else to tell you, St. Peter, but that's what my life was really all about. Of course, St. Peter looked at him and said, that's 994 points. He said, welcome, welcome. You know, that's kind of the point I'm trying to get across today when we think about this gospel. We need those things on the outside. We need to know our prayers. We need to go to church. We need to do all those things. But don't just do it because it just seems like the right thing to do. Do it because you want to get closer to God. You want to come to know God. I think today we challenge ourselves with what hat are we going to wear out there? What hat are we going to wear? Are we going to be the person that puts a hat on and, hey, look at me, I'm here? And then we take it off and we're a jerk on the outside? Or do we continue wearing it and let that be what guides us, what fills us, what helps us to live each and every day? Today, I'm going to ask you, keep wearing the hat outside of these doors.